Okay. Well, I want to begin by thanking everybody for being here. My name is Jonathan Cohn. I know many of you, and some of you I'm meeting for the first time, and that's wonderful either way. I'm the policy director here at Progressive Mass, and we're delighted to be continuing our series of spring webinars that we've called our Spring Forward series, where we want to have deeper dives into different issues that we've been advocating on, so that we can make sure that we're all better empowered as grassroots lobbyists to talk to our legislators about what they should be doing. Because, as I think we can all agree, they need to be doing a lot more than they are now. With April being Earth Month and next week, 1 week from today being Earth Day, thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about climate action in Massachusetts. We've seen a lot of discussion over the past year about about quote energy affordability, right? Given the fact that many people across the Commonwealth are seeing higher utility bills, and there's been discussion from the governor about the legislature about what to do in response to that. There have been some good ideas. There have been some terrible ideas floated for that, including the House's gutting of energy efficiency programs that not last month, earlier this year. Uh, but rather than kind of wading through all of that, thought that I would invite somebody who can speak well to this, Vick Mohanka, from Massachusetts Sierra Club, to do a deep dive for us about what actually are the drivers of these higher utility bills people are experiencing, and what can we do on the state level to make sure that we have policies that meet our goals of sustainability and meet our goals of equity that often go hand in hand when we do smart policy making together. So that is my kind of opening. Just again, thank you and welcome to everybody joining. Vic, I'm going to bring you up now and take myself on spotlight, and feel free, you should have the ability to share slides. And also, before I know, the way this will work, Vic will get to present. After Vic presents, we'll do Q&A. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat, or you can raise your hand when we have the Q&A session. Either way works.
All right, thank you, John. Can everybody see the slides? All
Yes.
right, I saw a thumbs up. Great. So everybody, we came out with a new presentation given how important affordability is. So I just want to say, as a special audience, I know a lot of you in the audience, this is the first time we are putting this presentation up publicly. So please email me or John your feedback. Let us know what you think about it, what your reactions are. It's going to cover a lot of stuff about energy policy in general and tie it all together with affordability and what Sierra Club and other environmental groups see as a solution for both making our energy bills more affordable and moving towards green energy and fighting the climate crisis. This is also a presentation that we are planning to bring around to municipalities around the state. So if you want to put together a local presentation, an activist training, that is something that we're extremely interested in doing. Please reach out to us to follow up. We will drive anywhere in the Commonwealth. We'll take a boat to Nantucket or if we have to, so let us know. All right. How can we make utility bills more affordable? Yeah, and this is subject to a lot of misinformation, disinformation. You might know there's a lot of conservative talking points out there saying how green energy is the reason why we have high electric bills, etc. Obviously, we vehemently disagree with that, and we have our own solutions and analysis. Something to note, utility bills have gone up. So it's inflation is very complicated. There's a lot of different places where inflation can happen. It can happen in healthcare costs, housing costs, higher education, groceries is a big part of inflation, transportation costs, getting to and from work and where you need to go. But utility bills have been a notable place for people's consumers' pocketbooks. The biggest reason why we have higher bills, especially around the gas sector, is the increased costs for pipelines. That's replacing pipelines, repairing them, potentially expanding as well. So another reason is high fuel costs. This is something that definitely moves more into the public sphere as or the public attention as we have international conflicts. Our fuel economies are all international commodities markets. So when there is a conflict, when Russia invades Ukraine, that affects global fuel prices. When we have all this stuff going on with Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, that affects global fuel prices. And then another thing to note for folks who aren't aware, most of our electricity on the New England grid, and we have a New England-wide grid, not a Massachusetts grid. So most of our statistics are for, it depends on what we're talking about, but our electric grid is New England. That most of our electricity is from natural gas power plants or fracked gas power plants. So they're burning methane to make electricity that we use. And that's in addition to all of the gas that we use for heating and cooking. So when the supply costs go up, that affects everything, not just heating, it affects our electricity as well. Some reasons why it's getting more expensive, the pipelines. The pipelines are old. Our system has been around for 100 years. It was not built for 100-year lifespan. So that creates increasing health and safety risks over time. More leaks, which is bad for the environment, bad for our health, increased state and municipal costs for Department of Public Works, different places like that where they really have to go in dig up everything, completely replace pipes. Um, it keeps becoming more and more expensive to fix up our old system. And energy use increases. We have a summer peak grid. So that means that you could think about this, the most electricity our grid uses is on those hot summer days, maybe like the equivalent of 1 week a year when everybody turns on their AC. That is what our electric grid is built for. We are building all these poles, wires, substations, power plants. Everything is built for that kind of like 1 week of super hot weather a year. That's not technically exactly how the peaks work, but that's like how you could think about it. It's basically 5 to 7 days a year that we are all trying to build up our system to meet and not have these blackouts. The business as usual model is what the utilities want to do. They like the system they have. They like the business model. They like the incentives. They like the profits that they're able to make on it. They like the way that they can make investments, and they like the way that regulators treat them. They like the limited ability of the public, environmental groups, and the Attorney General's office to intervene and lower costs and hold them accountable. And the pictures, a fun protest we did earlier this year when when the House was debating their energy bill, we had some of our activists dress up as CEOs of the utility companies, thanking the legislators for continuing to protect utility profits while raising our rates. The reality of the business as usual model is that customers pay for the distribution system. We are paying for the old pipes instead of the actual gas running through them. In 2025, they spent almost $1 billion to replace 266 miles of leak-prone pipes. That's $3 million per mile, which is a 40% increase over the previous year. So in that year, they spent 40% more. They replaced fewer miles of leak-prone pipe, and we got less than we got less even though we spent more. They have figured out a way to game the system to maximize their profits and those profit-seeking activities under our current regulations while not delivering any of the transition to clean energy, looking at any of the alternatives, or giving a real shake to conservation. What we should be doing is using as little gas as possible, as necessary to keep people comfortable, in Massachusetts. And that's not what the utility companies have an incentive to do. They have an incentive to do as much distribution work as possible, make as much infrastructure investment as possible so they can maximize their profit. In 10 years ago, two-thirds of the gas bill paid for the gas itself. Today, it's flipped. Less than a third of your gas bill goes for the gas itself, and 70% of the bill pays for infrastructure, profits, and taxes. We are paying for the system to deliver the energy, not the energy itself. The three largest gas utilities have more than doubled their gas assets since 2014 to reach $15 billion while spending $1 billion a year on pipeline replacements. So they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And it's a cycle of investing more into the system and being able to get more profits from running the system rather than delivering benefits to us. We also have a storytelling series. So you can see this URL at the bottom, sierraclub.org/Massachusetts/energy burden, because we identified this as a core political issue that we'd have to address in 2023. Uh, before the Abundance book came out, I was sounding the alarm bells, trying to say, hey, if we keep running our states in a way that doesn't make life easier and cheaper for the median income households, regular people, then what we're doing is we're setting up a situation where governments that are controlled by liberal politicians or the Democratic Party politicians, we're nonpartisan, but obviously there's a big difference between the two parties that run this country. Um, we are, so if we're not doing what's making life cheaper for that median income person in the states that are Democratic controlled, then we're actually have this political argument against us that's really, really powerful. And we wanted to highlight that all while also arguing for things like the Fair Share Amendment, higher taxes on the most wealthy people and corporate accountability. So we put out a storytelling series throughout the year in 2024 about how much people are spending. And just so folks know, it used a metric called energy burden. Energy burden is how much of your disposable income is going towards energy costs. For a high income household, the folks that got hit by the millionaire's tax, for example, $1 million a year of income is where that starts to kick in. They spend under 1% of their disposable income on energy bills. For low income households, so even people who are on the low income discount rate, we could see anything from 10% up to 20% or more being spent on energy bills. Once you get to those kinds of numbers, 10, 15, 20, you are talking about a massive part of the amount of people's income that they have. Uh, so that is when we call the household energy burdened. And at that point, when people are spending that much on energy out of their available income, you start to see folks, make that choice in their head. Am I going to get groceries or am I going to turn on my heat this winter? And that's exactly what we want to avoid. We want a system where everybody has access to the energy that they need to live comfortably and healthily. So the reality, and I referred to this earlier, the reality is that fossil fuel prices are volatile. Something else that I don't know if folks knew this, but when President Trump came into office, one of the switches they made was to open up our natural gas system to export. So we're actually taking natural gas, which is already pretty expensive for Americans, and we're now selling it out of America to other countries. This is a global commodity market that we have extremely little control over. Here's a chart from this is a new group that came up called Future of Heat Initiative, I believe. And this is the chart that shows how the spending on gas or the use of gas versus the gas price has basically flipped. So it used to be that we had a lot more gas consumption and gas price was pretty low. And now gas prices are high, even though consumption went down. Every single year, the utility companies apply for more and more to higher rates and more profits. So we've seen residential gas bills in Massachusetts increasing 10% every year for the last 5 years, even though we use 22% less gas than 10 years ago. National Grid filed a request for 12% more effective December 1st, 2026, which is a $24 per month increase for the average residential heating customer. And they actually have been doing around the state or around the National Grid gas delivery territory. They have been doing hearings hosted by Grid and DPU about the rate increases that Sierra Club has shown up at and created some talking points to talk against it because we see this as unnecessary, especially with their ballooning profits. And in addition to some of the rate increases, some of the other stuff that we've been arguing against, we have seen a recent proliferation of data centers. This is a much bigger threat in other states than in Massachusetts. So Sierra Club has a leading role nationally in this. We're seeing a lot of really uh, unpopular and controversial fights in Virginia, Tennessee, um, I'm blanking on some other states. I know Washington and Oregon. I think Oregon passed state legislation on data centers. So this is something that's popping up all over the place. Something to note is that in Massachusetts, a lot of the data center proposals are in gateway cities. So that's our environmental justice communities, low-income communities, communities of color have been targeted by the data centers. And it's a normal promise. It's like if you come take this polluting infrastructure, then we will give you some, tax incentives and tax revenue for your city. So just like, factories and energy generation and energy infrastructure. So the way that we pay for data centers is it's a little bit sneaky and indirect sometimes. So basically, when a data center comes in, they have a anticipated amount of load that they want to put on the grid. So then the utility companies have to go. Sorry, is there a little echo? I think it's good now. So the utility companies have to come in, and not only do they have to anticipate buying more capacity or energy generation for that, they have to go and build new substations, transmission wires, distribution wires, poles, underground lines, all of that. And when they do those infrastructure upgrades, everybody who's pays the electric bill gets charged for it. And then the other way that we pay for it is if you remember those 7 days a year, well, data centers are on during those 7 days a year. So that's like our peak events. So the most polluting and the most expensive energy that we use year round is from data center or is from those peak events. So when we keep having higher and higher peaks, what we're really saying is that we want to create more economic incentives for the most polluting and expensive resources, which are always things like dual fuel plants, meaning they're burning fuel oil, not just natural gas, peaker plants, and natural gas peaker plants. It's not renewables, which have zero marginal costs. Um, yeah, so this is more about the business model for utility companies, and it kind of describes how it's like a little bit uh, complex how they think about this. But what a utility company wants to do, and I think a lot of people don't know what the business model is of a utility company. they're not making profits based on how much electricity they sell or what metrics they meet and how well that they're doing their job. Like they're not making money on having less blackouts, for example. What they make money on is the asset values. So what the utilities want to do is they want to take capital in from the market, spend the capital on infrastructure, on assets. So they want to make sure it's going towards infrastructure and not services. That's another important distinction. They want to make sure it's building physical things. They earn a return. It's called return on equity. So they earn a return on how much stuff they own, how much the value of the grid is, basically, and then just repeat that cycle. Eversource's profits more than doubled in 2025, looking year over year. Um, and National Grid is seeking that huge rate increase. We also saw a huge rate increase from Liberty Gas. So we see the utility companies keep jacking up the rates, they keep making more profits, and it keeps feeding into this machine of taking capital in, spending it to build things, and then that's creating, because of the formulas that our regulators made, it's creating more and more profits, and all of that profit has to come from our bills. All of that is what we pay for. And the utility companies lobby. They lobby the legislature, the governor, and they lobby in the press. They lobby school children. So this is a story. One of the utility companies actually paid for these really fancy, like it's almost like a kid's book. And they made one for all the kids in a school district. And they get to charge us for that, even though I don't know how that's connected to their mission of delivering electricity. We saw this year, last year, affordability is a major, major issue politically. Something that I'll note is that I've been doing this professionally for about 11 or 12 years. And this is the first time in the polling that we see energy bills or energy issues, or even climate change, really, anything related to that, poll as high as it does on what's on voters' minds. A lot of times it'll be like war, pocketbook issues, healthcare costs, things like that, economy, eggs, whatever. And this is the first time I've seen utility bills be this high up. We saw that come up in Georgia. We saw it in Virginia and New Jersey. These were extremely high level elections that Sierra Club supported strongly for candidates who supported both environmental and energy affordability priorities, and won based on it. So the governor in Massachusetts is no exception, and it is an election year here, so it's something that you'll hear her talk about a lot. You'll also note folks like Senator Markey that Sierra Club and Progressive Mass have already endorsed, that energy affordability is a huge, huge priority. So the governor promised an energy affordability agenda. She put in her own bill proposal last May that we have a blog post about. Folks can read about um, our take on that. And she is taking a strong stance right now. Not only does she want data centers to come into Massachusetts, she also wants a all of the above approach to energy. And for me, this just reminds me of Charlie Baker, who would always make these food analogies. He wanted a combo platter for our energy grid. And Maura Healey's new thing is she has like a bag of munchkins, and she's like, she wants all the munchkins, and each munchkin is a different type of energy source. So that's what we see from our governor. And the legislature, I think, is it's unclear. They seem pretty okay with that vision to have the different number of sources, including nuclear energy, which Sierra Club strongly opposes. as part of our energy mix. So the reality is that we cannot do all of the above. It sounds nice, but it's not an actual option. If there's only so many electrons that we need, there's only so much electricity, then we don't have to plan for twice as much electricity as we actually need. And what she's really saying there is that she wants to make investments in two parallel systems. Those parallel systems are where our energy comes from. So we see this as two distinct paths, and investing in both makes no sense. But she has to pick. We have the choice of investing in energy conservation and clean energy, or replacing our aging gas pipelines and doubling down on natural gas. Investing in both just gets us a much higher cost and a lot more energy than we can actually use. It also just props up fossil fuel industry, which we know we need to decrease to meet our clean energy goals and our emissions goals and to do our part in the fight against climate change and reduce public health impacts. So we see this as we see all of the above as mutually exclusive with affordability. True affordability would come with a strong directional choice to commit to one least cost system instead of just saying we'll invest in everything. So, what we see as the solution for affordability first is energy conservation. You might have heard this before. I see some of my energy folks on here, and you've definitely heard this, but we say in the field, energy efficiency is the first fuel. So, before we buy gas, before we buy oil, before we invest in solar or import hydro or whatever, the cheapest thing to do is energy efficiency. And this always reminds me, it's great that this is during Earth Month. It always reminds me of reduce, reuse, recycle. Reducing is by far the best option, and that applies to our energy grid as well. And then the other things we have to do is that clean energy supply and local energy delivery, which is something that is often overlooked. But the reason that's important is because if we're generating it locally, then we don't have to invest as much in our distribution and transmission systems to send the energy around. So when you heard those statistics I gave you about energy, the supply costs going down, and then the delivery costs going up, the solution to that is local energy delivery. Right now, we import energy. We have a lot of consumption and not a lot of production. And what we could do is produce where we live. So solar is a great example of this to make it so that we don't actually have to invest as much in that delivery system. So here's some stats about Mass Save, or some arguments about Mass Save, which is a really, really important program. I think people are putting together the analysis now of how much we would be spending on energy without Mass Save. And something that I want to make sure folks know is that investing in Mass Save helps all of us. Those 7 days of peaks that we all pay for in the summer, those go down because of Mass Save. Having higher peaks, if we didn't have Mass Save, would mean we'd actually have to pay year round to keep power plants open for those 7 days. Power plants that are the most polluting that we've actually been able to successfully close because we've had energy efficiency programs in Massachusetts. The House recently voted to cut the Mass Save budget by $1 billion. This is really, really important. One of their core arguments was that the Mass Save program was a transfer of wealth or income from low-income communities out to high-income communities. Well, even like letting go of if that was true or not 5 years ago, we know for the 2025 to 2027 Mass Save plan that that's not true. The majority of households getting the Mass Save benefits are low and moderate income households and renters. So right now is the most equitable the Mass Save program has ever been, and now is when the House wants to cut it. Another aspect that folks overlook in this is that we have our clean energy workforce is around 100,000 workers. A lot of that is dependent on the Mass Save program. So killing the Mass Save program could also lead to massive job loss. It could lead to businesses going out of business. And then, if, as the House promises, they'll increase spending again after fixing the problems by defunding it, those businesses won't be around to actually pick up those jobs that they want to fund again after the billion-dollar cut. So this is a huge threat to all of our policy goals. It's a huge threat to our social justice goals. It's a threat to workers. This seems like a all-around terrible idea. So we want to talk a little bit about how clean energy is cheaper, it's locally available, it's unlimited at a zero fuel cost. So when they bid into the market, they bid in at zero supply cost, which actually saves us a ton of money and drives down the supply cost of energy. It's energy independence. Instead of being dependent on national, international markets, this is a way, and this is my pitch to more conservative folks, is like, I want domestic energy. Like, I want us to control our energy here in Massachusetts. I don't understand why being beholden to international energy is like a good idea. So that's my attempt. I don't know if it's effective or not, but I feel like I would much rather have energy created here and consumed here than being reliant on fossil fuels we ship in from Pennsylvania. And it is a proven technology. So it's several decades old. From 2012 to 2022, the cost of solar fell by 80%. Lithium-ion batteries have seen 90% cost reduction since 2010, and we expect 40% more additional reductions from now until 2030. And that's another way that we're going to reduce the peak is by investing in batteries. It makes the renewables it makes them less intermittent, more reliable. It also, what the batteries can do is buy energy when it's cheap at nighttime and then sell out in the peak. So that makes it way cheaper for us. And having the batteries, from what I hear from electrical utility engineers, they offer a lot of really good grid services to make our electric grid just better in every way and easier to manage. So up until now, we've had almost no energy storage, which means no redundancy, no safety built into our energy grid. Having batteries be part of the system could really increase a lot of those cost savings and the next level of control over our grid. In the past, the way it was set up is that all of our energy use and our production had to be met minute by minute. So if Fenway turned on their lights, a power plant, 100 miles away has to crank up how much fuel they're shoveling in, or however it works. Another thing I want to say about energy, clean energy, is that it accounts for 90% of the new electrical generating capacity added in the first 7 months of 2025. So it is a fast growing industry in America. It is the energy of the future. I probably don't have to sell a bunch of you on this in the progressive mass call, but it's something to note is that it is it's the direction we're going in, and we see that in red states too. So no matter where we are in the US, we're seeing more and more renewables enter our grids. And this is the dynamic I was just explaining and the terminology for this for folks who aren't familiar with it is we use the terms distributed energy resources, DERs. So the old model of the grid where you had a power plant in the middle and then it just went out over transmission lines, out in the delivery system, it was very top down. The distributed energy resources are much more horizontally organized. Here's an example that we could use from real life. South Australia, nearing 100% renewable energy. Electric prices have been plunging. Most homes have rooftop solar and use almost no grid electricity. This is a test case for the financial benefits that can be reaped from large-scale grid decarbonization. 84% of its electricity came from solar and wind energy in the final quarter of 2025, which is the highest proportion of any major grid in the world. This is a boon for the South Australian government because in the past, it's been criticized for driving up electric prices with the rapid adoption of renewable energy. So the same argument you hear here that green energy is making energy more expensive is what you hear in Australia. And it's the same, conservative argument everywhere. And we have an example of it driving down prices by having enough renewable energy on the grid. And here's another reality. Another thing that we have been prioritizing is changing utility business practices. I haven't opened up the chat, but I saw a couple of questions in there that seem a little related to this and why the governor is letting the utilities do all this, or why their government lets the utilities do this. And we are fighting that. So we are fighting to make polluters pay and hold polluters accountable. So we are fighting for data centers to be paying for their impact and infrastructure. We want the utilities to be accountable when they build new wires and substations. They have to look into alternatives, look at energy conservation. Right now, that's not something that they're doing. We want to put people over corporate profit. We have a two-bill campaign called People Over Energy Profits, and that is fighting for a moratorium on new big gas infrastructure near environmental justice communities and making it so that utility companies can't charge us for the lobbying they do to raise our bills. Right now, the utility companies can spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to basically make a regulatory argument and lobbying argument to raise our bills and do less renewable energy. And then they actually can turn around and put that on our bills. So about 10 states make that illegal. We want that to be illegal here. We need to get control over return on equity, so making that more in line with what other states have and what is just and reasonable. We need to reduce energy burden. So we need to make sure that there's tiered progressive rate structures so that low income folks can actually afford their energy bills. We need to break the cycle of unending capital spending on pipelines. You'll hear something called GSEP, Gas Safety Enhancement Program. We are fighting to reduce the amount that the utilities can spend on that program because it has become a boondoggle where they're just spending more and more money. To sum it up, clean energy is the only pathway forward for affordable energy bills. All options on the table means we're investing in fossil fuels and clean energy. Why do they want to make two investments when we only need one investment in our energy grid? And we have a Cape Cod wind rally. In this picture that you can see, we are fighting so hard to get offshore wind, to get renewable energy, to get batteries safely sited all over the state. and reduce the amount of energy we use. And yeah, we can't keep relying on fossil fuels, which keeps making our bills higher, contributing to the climate crisis, and polluting our communities. Okay, here's the laundry list. I could put this in chat, or John, I sent you the links as well. This is I just wanted to do a little bit of, um, advertising for our online actions at Sierra Club. Right now, we are running a couple. Some are based on, so that is for the state senate, which is still, they're going to take up a climate bill or energy affordability bill, as the legislature and the governor want to call it. Um, which I put that in air quotes because the Speaker of the House, they're calling it affordability bill, but the Speaker of the House said it won't really do much for affordability. And my reading of the bill is that after the House bill passes, the trend lines on our bills are not going to change at all. Um, yes, ACPs. Um, can I explain that one in the question and answer? Because that could get into it. So Sierra Club has one about Save Mass Save, so specifically focused on the Mass Save stuff. We have one about PFAS, so that's the forever chemicals in folks' homes. We have an online action about data centers. So if you're concerned about a data center, that is a really important one. It argues for state legislation. It argues against the state tax credit. So right now, qualifying data centers can actually get a tax credit from the state, incentivizing them to be built here. That's something our governor seems to like. And it advocates for municipal zoning regulations. In Lowell, they have a data center with diesel backup. So they can run diesel engines in a residential neighborhood as backup energy for the data center with no reporting, no regulation. They can just run these fossil fuel generators for the data center whenever they want, basically, with very little oversight. Um, and then I also put in here the Mass Power Forward policy list. So you could see that if you look at the second link John put in chat. That is the Earth Month Senate advocacy. So that includes Mass Save, it includes the ACPs, and it includes all of the asks that we had for the House over to the Senate. So it's the stuff that we like in the House bill is the second chunk of bullets, and the stuff that we don't like, or that's missing from the House bill. Thank you. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to this email address. For folks who don't have my email address, and if you have my email address, you could reach out to me. But my
Awesome.
email inbox. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, feel free to drop it in the chat. I was gonna say we're gonna do Q&A, but before we do Q&A, can I get a round of Zoom applause for Vic? Okay, I wanted to pull up some of the questions from the chat. I love how Zoom shows this on screen these days. Uh, saw a question in the chat earlier from Catherine about why does the governor allow the kind of the utility rate increases?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been asking these questions for ages. I think there's like this complicated legal, it's like very political, and then they cover it with a layer of like legalese. Um, so there's a lot of people in our state government and the DPU and EEA going all the way up saying, "Oh, like we can't do anything," basically. So every time we try to do more about this, you'll just hear back from an army of lawyers saying, "Oh, well, we can't really try that because the utility companies will sue us." Our government hasn't tried to do more. So they're basically a bunch of lawyers, I don't want to say like hallucinating, but they're anticipating a bunch of legal challenges and litigation um, over challenging, the long-standing adjudicatory precedent. And this is all run through an adjudicatory process, which is different than a regulatory. It is a kind of regulatory process where The utility company makes a filing. A bunch of people who have party to the case can advocate for it on paper. The utility company is legally required to respond to them. So there's basically this like recorded debate, and then the DPU makes a decision, which is pretty much every single time somewhere in the middle of where those two parties have made arguments. So anything outside of those norms is not, there's no precedent for. So I think that's a lot of it. And the governor's a lawyer. You know, she was our attorney general. She hired a bunch of lawyers to run EEA, to run DPU. So I think there's a lot of like that um, legal momentum where they're like, and then just thinking like, oh, well, we don't want to get sued, but it hasn't really been tested. So it's a good question. It's interesting.
And so I also see in the chat, so what do you see as the chance that the Senate will take off the massive cuts that the House did? Uh, Obviously hoping that they don't and they ignore that and fight against it. But what do you what's the current landscape in the Senate?
It's impossible to predict the future. So usually I think historically the Senate has been really good on our issues and a lot closer to where climate advocates are. But I think the Mass Save program, it's been around for a long time, over 10 years. So they're able to come up with a lot of individual horror stories about it. And it also has that distinction of a lot of the benefits are like society wide versus individual. When you have a program with individual benefits, it's a lot easier to justify it than if it has society wide benefits. So it's I think politically what I'm hearing from senators is that it's hard for them to defend it. And then we also see on the conservative side, there's a lot of lockstep messaging spread by folks like Mass Fiscal Alliance, Boston Herald, all the way up to Fox News, which is still the most watched news program in America. Um, and we know that our legislators, I think this is your stat, right, John, that they always think that their districts are more conservative than they are. They listen to the conservative voices more. So that's what we're up against on this. So I'm pretty confident, I'm hopeful that we won't get the full $1 billion cut. But what I'm hearing is that it's a real fight to get it down to zero. And I'm really not sure if we can get that far. And if it's not at zero, then in conference committee, they will just be quibbling over what the number is, which is arbitrary. Nobody knows what these numbers mean. And even the experts don't know what they mean because we haven't done something like this before with a statutory requirement to reduce the size of the program. So we're we quibbling over a number that is just a signaling thing and devastating to our economy and our environment. So I'm hoping we can
What
just
a great way to
also
make
argue for
policy.
yeah. Yeah.
I saw this in the chat and you noted before that you would touch on this on Q&A. So ACPs.
Yes. Okay, so I've been trying to explain these for months and trying to figure out the simplest way to do this. So utility companies, and companies that buy energy in Massachusetts are required to buy renewable energy. That's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard. We fought to increase it. So for folks who are in progressive mass 8 years ago, 9 years ago, I was helping out John with connecting this through fighting for an increase in the RPS to buy more renewable energy. When they're not able to buy that renewable energy, they paid a penalty called the alternative compliance payment. Charlie Baker took that money. It ended up being hundreds of millions of dollars. Charlie Baker took that money and sat on it. And then I think when Healy came into office, she started using the money, but there's still some left over. So she made a choice last year. They were looking for any type of way to reduce bills. So she made a choice last year to take the alternative compliance payment funds and push that back into the rate base. So give it back to ratepayers on a per kilowatt hour. So like you get your money back based on how much you consume. She gave it back to ratepayers. And part of the reason why this is terrible is because it completely undermines the point of a renewables market if they can just pay the money into a ACP fund that goes back to ratepayers who they charge more because they keep charging us more and more, which goes back into the ACPs, back to ratepayers. So it's just creating like another circular market, and it disincentivizes companies and municipalities from buying more renewables. So all these towns that have a 100% green plan for municipal aggregation, they're all looking at canceling those plans because that extra money, instead of going towards renewables, is just going back to ratepayers outside of their town. So if you're trying to buy 100% green energy, you're actually gonna have a really hard time if they get this ACP thing through because the ACPs, instead of going towards green energy, it's just gonna go back to people's bills. And the majority of those bills pay for things like, if you add it up, utility profits plus fossil fuels. So you'll be paying 100% green energy, but subsidizing fossil fuel consumption. So it's just a terrible, it's like the third order effects in a complicated market when they came up with a market solution for renewable energy, kind of ruining all that. Sorry if that was circuitous. It's tough to explain the complicated setups.
Before I go to the next question, I see a hand up from Andy. Was that clarifying on what Vic just said? You can feel free to unmute.
No, it's not quite on that point. So if someone wanted to add to that, or I can wait.
Okay, let me do the other ones that were kind of in the queue in the chat, and then I'll come back.
Sure.
So Vic, can you share more about the type of batteries we could be scaling up for grid energy storage?
Yeah, there's two things on our radar. One is utility scale batteries. I believe these are usually still lithium ion. So I don't know if there's really any other commercially viable batteries in our application queues right now. So we've supported projects in Everett. We're supporting one in Revere right now. We supported one in Tewksbury. And the idea is that these are really big batteries near a lot of utility infrastructure. So I think all of those are right next to some sort of like substation or other grid infrastructure. And really the purpose is like I said, it's buy energy when it's cheap and then sell it when it's expensive. And by that, it's actually going to flatten out our energy consumption to make it cheaper. The other one is something that we support in the House bill called vehicle to grid. And that's like using the car battery in your driveway to push energy back onto the grid during a peak event. So imagine you're not using your car on a really hot day, and at nighttime you charge it up. During the day, you can sell it. You can actually make money from your car battery just cycling up and down at certain times of day. So that's kind of the vision that we have for the vehicle to grid thing. Um, and yeah, we'll see if it pans out. That's like kind of cutting edge stuff on a grid scale.
I see a question as well about how would eliminating or reducing kind of mass save impact the Massachusetts 2040 plan?
I'm not sure what the 2040 plan means in that parlance.
I think that's let me pull this up.
Yeah, I'm also about to open
Okay, I
those
think that that's
hyperlinks.
I'm on the MB I think that's about the MBTA, and I don't know if that's a separate thing, but I'd be curious about how it relates to the general climate, like meeting our climate goals, which would be more to like kind of a 2050 plan.
Yeah, it would definitely make meeting our climate goals much harder, because basically we wouldn't have any real incentives. The problem that Mass Save solves is that, for example, if you have to weatherize your home, that's going to take like a $50,000 upfront capital investment, and then you save that over time. So a lot of these projects will have, and folks who've gotten solar or done efficiency work will know, you make the investment in 1 year, it's a huge cost, and then there's a payback period, 6, 7, 10, 12-year payback period on that investment. So the issue that MassSave solves is making that initial capital investment. They also do a bunch of other things. They vet people, and then they make the capital investment lower, which makes it so that your payback period is faster. So after if they can get rid of Mass Save, they reduce any incentive for making that initial investment. Basically, it's just up to folks in the free market at that point to make efficiency investments. And we could meet our 2050 goals without Mass Save, but it makes it much, much harder.
Andy, I'll go to the question that you had with the hand raised a second ago.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Vic. This is great. I'm not going to get into the mass save because I think that was a giant negotiating chip to improve the former 5175 that was such a disaster in the fall. But I don't want to talk about that. What I'd like to talk about is, or ask, this whole connection between profits and pipeline business is a really good argument. And I think they can understand it. And I had meeting with my rep, and the idea of the replacement versus the repair. I mean, the notion of let's not do the replacement because it's what number of years we're buying into. I guess my question is, what's the status of that? Is that in the bill that's gone to the Senate? And if so, what is the hope of getting that? Because I think that one will sell.
Well, if you close the door and you go into a representative's office, they'll rant and rave about how great it is. None of them supported voting on it on the floor. There were amendments on the bill to make that happen, but the culture in the House disincentivizes representatives to fight for things that they say they support. And another thing, you'll never see, I mean, not never, but I would love to see that person you talk to put out some sort of public statement.
Yeah.
So make a video on Instagram, write a letter in a newsletter, send out a press release saying that stuff. The representatives have not been doing that. And I've had a number of them, after I close the door or, we pick up the phone and it's off the record, they will tell me how great it is and how much they support it, but they're not using their political power to actually, they're not putting any political capital into it. So in the House, there was maybe an amendment or two filed in that direction. And the folks who filed them just folded. They didn't fight for it. They didn't do anything publicly to support it.
Okay.
And, like so much else in our legislature, they died in darkness. And there's zero in the House bill to do anything about utility profits or profiteering. So that's why we're saying the House bill, it basically just they want to call it affordability, but it didn't do anything about the biggest things driving our affordability crisis. So I don't call it an affordability bill. I am hopeful some of the senators have looked at that debate and said, hey, we want to take up GSEP. So please talk to your senators, tell them to support GSEP reform. Chair Barrett knows what that means. There's a whole Attorney General report. We were part of a stakeholder group contributing to it, bringing those costs down to zero. That's kind of where a lot of this distribution, profiteering, pipeline conversation is centered around GSEP. But tell your senators to tell him that they support this and that they just want messaging for it or something. But yeah, the House was very disappointing. They didn't do any
Yeah.
of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see also a note in the chat about the making sure like we were successfully able to prevent the House from weakening the 2030 goals as that they're planning to in the original version of their energy bill. What advocacy is needed to prevent the Senate from doing so as well?
I mean, if anybody knows, correct me. I think we won that fight in the House. So I
I'm
don't,
basically saying,
I,
is
this,
there any risk of that coming back up? Is I think the
yeah, I
question.
mean, yeah, it's anything is possible. I don't know. It hasn't been on the radar.
Yep.
So like we haven't been expecting the Senate to look at the backlash the House got in November and say, "Hey, we want that. Let's go start doing something about
Yeah,
the climate goals." So I think the political signal that we all sent to them in November was very strong. I can't imagine the Senate wants to bring that up again.
that makes total sense. See in the
Yeah.
chat. You've mentioned in terms of the alphabet soup of acronyms, GSAP.
Yes, Gas Safety Enhancement Program. This is a program to repair pipes, and it created a fresh kind of financing for the utility companies. The simplest way, actually, I linked this in the chat. I don't know how up to date this page is, because every year it changes. There's no dates on it, so I'm not sure. But the info here is good. I just can't speak to how updated it is, just so folks know about this hyperlink. Um, So basically, it's just a new type of financing mechanism that changes the way that the gas companies can replace the pipes. Um, the way I explain it is it created a set of incentives that allowed the gas companies to game our regulatory system. So basically, they're able to do a ton of work or say they're doing a ton of work, pull in a bunch of capital, spend it on distribution infrastructure, get the increased asset prices, raise their return on equity, raising their profits, and then that makes it more attractive to do even more of that because investors will be like, hey, they've got a money spigot in Massachusetts. Let's keep investing in gas utilities because they have this GSEP money spigot. And the DPU is not saying let's make it smaller. Well, they weren't until last year when we won a victory. Sierra Club is an intervener, and we won a victory where we forced the DPU to say, "Hey, let's make this smaller." But there's no legislative controls on the spending on this thing. So that's what we're fighting for right now is a legislative control to require it to go down. Right now, it's regulatory. Um, but it would be great to have a statutory limit on how much the gas companies can actually spend on this. Because in my opinion, they've gamed the system. They've maximized this math for profit and for it all it's doing is making our distribution costs go up and up and up. If you look at your gas bill, it's all distribution.
And then one other question I saw in the chat: will you be sharing the slides for people who want to take a look at them later?
Um, I think I definitely want to share the last slide. But we would love to go and do. I want to also, like I said, this is our first time doing this
Yeah,
presentation. So as you can see, I'm like still working out the flow a little bit. And I would love to go through it with my folks and kind of like, yeah, keep iterating on it.
yeah,
So especially the last slide we could send out with all the policy stuff.
yeah.
That's in our action forms. And then if you have requests for other pieces of it, just reach out to John or I and we could talk about that. All of this stuff is on fact sheets that present it in a way better format. The presentation is not the information format.
I would
This
say
is the yeah.
to the question in the chat, the recording, yes, we have been recording
Yeah.
it, and I will be downloading that and putting it on the Progressive Mass YouTube page, either later tonight or sometime tomorrow. Awesome. And then any other final things other than another round of Zoom applause for Vic before we close out? I want to thank Vic. Thank you again for taking time this evening. And then another thank you to everybody who's joining us this evening, and then everybody who watches this later. And with that, I will turn off the recording.